Good morning, and welcome to the Global Energy Institute's Energy Innovates webinar series, where we convene experts to discuss the innovation that is driving America's energy future. Today, our focus is a blueprint for the hydrogen economy. This is our 8th installment of this online series, and I want to thank our sponsor, Siemens Energy. Today, we're excited to hear from Congressman Greg Pence and a number of business leaders that are on the front lines of efforts to reduce emissions from hard-to-abate sectors and turn the promise of a hydrogen economy into reality. Even a few short years ago, hydrogen didn't receive much attention as a potential solution to climate and energy challenges, but that's rapidly changing. Earlier this month, the Department of Energy hosted the Hydrogen Shot Summit. The 4 opening keynote speakers for the event were Secretary of Energy Jennifer Granholm, Special Presidential Envoy for Climate John Kerry, Senator Joe Manchin, Chairman of the Senate Energy Committee, and Bill Gates. If that lineup doesn't illustrate that hydrogen has truly arrived on the energy scene, I don't know what will. With that, let's watch a quick video from our sponsor and then turn it over to GEI's Ruth Demeter to kick off our opening discussion.
If the one constant in life is change, shouldn't we all change for the better? Let's champion the energy transformation. Why can't global challenges become opportunities? Let's make our ideas a reality. What if an idea became a solution for millions? Let's transform our natural resources. Shouldn't reliable, affordable, and sustainable energy be for all? Let's see people as the catalysts of real change. Isn't it time we harnessed our collective energy? Let's galvanize change in our homes and offices and industries. Because shouldn't our technology serve us today and tomorrow? Let's energize society.
Good morning. I'm honored today to be able to speak to our first guest who has become a strong advocate for hydrogen technology on Capitol Hill. Congressman Greg Pence was first elected in 2018 to represent the 6th District of Indiana. Prior to coming to Congress, Representative Pence served as an officer in the Marines before going on to work on the business side of the energy industry, as well as running his family's chain of gas stations and convenience stores. Representative Pence has made job creation and economic growth the cornerstone of his work in Congress, where he currently serves on the House Energy and Commerce Committee and the subcommittees on Energy and Subcommittee on Consumer Protection and Commerce. Representative Pence, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Ruth. Thank you all for having me.
Now, to dive right into it, can you please tell us how your private sector background managing energy-related businesses, refining, gas stations, convenience stores, inform your approach to both energy and climate issues as a member of Congress, and how you first became interested in hydrogen specifically?
Well, I'm an all-of-the-above solution type of person. Not only was I kind of on the retail side of the energy distribution. At one point in my career, I was the National Director of Fuels for Circle K, shipping product all over the United States. So I've never been in politics before. This is my second term. What I want to bring to the table as we look at alternative energy sources or supplies is use my background and talk about how we're going to get the products to the vehicles or to the systems that are going to use that particular energy. And I've done hydrogen because we have Cummins Engine Company is headquartered in my own hometown. And we talk about a lot of other battery transportation industry options, but on heavy duty and off-road, batteries really aren't practical. So things like hydrogen, a combination of hydrogen and battery make a lot of sense to me. And I believe that whether it's green or blue, there's ways to deliver that product to the vehicles as they drive down the road.
And hydrogen, and kind of like you just mentioned, hydrogen is often referred to as a Swiss Army knife of clean energy because of its potential applications across a wide variety of sectors, including light-duty vehicles, trucking and manufacturing, to the industrial processes, to storage and the electric grid. Do any applications stand out to you as especially promising, particularly as it relates to the economy of Indiana and the Midwest?
Yeah, I think it feedstock in plastics, chemicals, and other industrial, as well as I mentioned, with Cummins Engine Company. They are developing engines that are going to utilize hydrogen technology. The cost isn't there. The economies of scale aren't there. But I think if anybody can figure out how to get there, they sure can.
Thank you. And earlier this year, you introduced bipartisan legislation, the Clean Energy Hydrogen Innovation Act. Tell us about that bill and how it would help the fledgling hydrogen industry.
Yeah, it expands the list of hydrogen energy applications under the DOE loan program. It seeks to help bridge gaps between R&D and commercialization for an extended list of potential hydrogen applications, power generation, transportation, industrial manufacturing, and it provides opportunities to receive needed investment to scale up operations so that technologies can become more economical.
Fantastic. According to the Hydrogen Council, there are now more than 360 megawatt scale or above hydrogen projects underway around the world, and over 130 of them have been announced in 2021 alone. So public and private investment is really taking off. What are the key challenges that face the ultimate success of these projects? And from your vantage point on the Energy and Commerce Committee, are there other federal policies besides loan guarantees that warrant consideration in order to increase the chances that these investments are successful?
Well, the second question there is something I think we need to continue to explore, but I'm going to answer the first one. I think we need to be incorporating, and I actually had a Zoom call at the beginning of the week with DOE and said, you have got to incorporate the distribution element in your consideration and maybe even funding. So maybe that answers your second question. How we're going to get, a lot of people are working on different technologies in this space, but we have to be able to get the product where it needs to be when it needs to be there. And currently, under the petroleum industry, it delivers energy to the transportation industry. Of course, that's my background. Where it needs to be when it needs to be, and it's very efficient. And I don't think we're taking that into consideration as we talk about developing hydrogen technology. We can come up with a great technology that we can put in. If we can't get that energy where it needs to be, then our timeline is going to be way, way off. And when I had that conversation with the DOE, I shared with them many other issues involved in distribution, storage being one of them, transportation being, pipelines. Too many folks are talking about getting rid of pipelines, and with hydrogen we can utilize existing pipelines. And so I think we need to look at how we're going to get there as well.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We look forward to speaking to you in the future about this and look forward to all the good things that you have coming in terms down the hydrogen pipeline. So thank you so much, Congressman.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for having me.
I'm pleased to now welcome Rich Vorberg, President North America for Siemens Energy, who brings more than 28 years of experience with Siemens across a variety of their businesses. Welcome, Rich. Rich, Siemens Energy is a new company that spun out of Siemens with a truly comprehensive portfolio of products and services spanning the entire energy value chain. The topic of our discussion today, hydrogen, also has applications across that same value chain. So I think it's fitting that you would join our discussion. So let me ask the simple big picture question. What's the big deal about hydrogen from Siemens Energy's perspective?
Well, thanks, Marty. Really great to be here. So as Siemens, we're Siemens Energy. We're a brand new company, and people say, well, Siemens has been around for years, and that's true. But a year ago tomorrow, we split off and became our own Siemens Energy, and we're a 90,000, still a 90,000 employee company with about 10,000 people in the U.S. And what that has allowed us to do is become what we call a pure play energy company, which that's our focus now is energy and how to decarbonize the world. We hear an awful lot about energy and decarbonization, and really we can put our focus on there because we sort of go front to back when it comes to energy. And we've got transmission, we've got generation, we've got industrial applications, and then we also own a majority share of wind turbine manufacturer Siemens Gamesa. So we go back and forth, and then on top of that, we've got our new energy business, and in there we've put our hydrogen business, but also it's going to be more than just hydrogen. There's so much potential to decarbonize, and I think we're uniquely positioned to drive that. So it's exciting future. And when you look at hydrogen's not new. It's been around for an awful long time. It's abundant in the universe, one of the most abundant elements. And then you look at what people have used it for. You see it in different processes, refineries, ammonia manufacture. You also see it in NASA used it to launch the shuttles. But what's really new for us is this really true green hydrogen, taking renewables and creating that into hydrogen. And then when you get the hydrogen, where do you use it? And there's different places you can use it. You can convert it to e-methanol, e-ammonia, e-gasoline. And then, that's where we see sort of the front end, the mobility side. And then we can also see it going into the industrial side, industrial electricity production, burning it in existing gas turbines. So, you ask, what's exciting? What's the big deal about hydrogen? That's what's going to help us to get our economy and our world decarbonized. So that's what makes it a big deal for us here at Siemens Energy.
Understood. That's a nice overview. And now we've got speakers later that are going to talk about specific industries, but as you've kind of laid out for us, Siemens Energy is kind of one of a kind, do it across your entire portfolio. So maybe you could walk us through the kind of the breadth and diversity of the applications to help illustrate why, as Ruth mentioned before, it's sometimes referred to as a Swiss Army knife of clean energy.
Yeah, and actually I brought a picture, if we could bring that picture up of what we as Siemens Energy actually do. And when you look at that picture, you see it go back and forth. You see over on the far left side, you see wind turbines and renewables and solar, and then it creates the hydrogen from there, and then the electricity comes into our electrolyzer and creates the hydrogen. Can either run it right into existing gas turbines or new gas turbines. It's not infrastructure that we've got to change in our gas turbines. Maybe tune them up a little bit to run on hydrogen, but then we can also utilize it in different industries. And it talked about methanol as well as gasoline, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But into the airline industries, and then we can also use hydrogen as a great storage mechanism. So you create hydrogen, you store it, you can store it for an awful long time, and then utilize it within the processes. And that, batteries are a great thing, and they'll be one of the areas that really help us decarbonize our world. But batteries are limited to a certain time frame. So we're excited. We think hydrogen is that Swiss Army knife. It's got a lot of capabilities, and I think that'll be the one that gets us to be decarbonized in the world.
All right, so you've given us a really good picture of the breadth, but let me put you on the spot and ask you, out of all of those, let's go deeper on one of them that you guys are really excited about in this area.
Yeah, so it's kind of hard to narrow down to one area, but let me choose one. And the reason I get to choose it is on the weekend I opened up my Car and Driver magazine, and unbeknownst to me, Car and Driver did a special on a project called, and I'm probably going to butcher the name in Chile, but it's called Hari Uni. So this is where we are, Siemens Energy, are supplying an electrolyzer to southern Chile. In southern Chile, they've got an awful lot of wind, wind that they can't use in that area. So they've got wind turbines there that's going to create electricity. That electricity then will feed to the electrolyzer to create hydrogen. And we've teamed up with Porsche, and then also through certain government, German government sponsorships and funds. What we're seeing is that they want to take that hydrogen, turn that into e-gasoline or e-methanol, I guess is probably the right word, and different e-fuels. And then they can burn that, actually, ship that around the world and utilize that for the Porsche vehicles. Porsche is concerned that they've got combustion engines in their cars, and they need to make sure that they're doing their part on showing how to be green as well. So, and this isn't a pipe dream. This is something that's actually happening. And by 2022, they're already going to say, they're telling us they're going to produce 200,000 gallons of e-methanol. And then by 2024, there'll already be up to 15 million gallons of ethanol and 150 million gallons by 2026. This is how it grows. This is how the scale up and how we create a hydrogen economy. We got to start with different pilots, different demonstration plants, and start growing from there. So, we're really excited about when the world starts seeing, we as Siemens Energy are kind of inwardly focused often, and when you start opening up magazines and the world seeing what we're doing, that becomes exciting, and I think there's a lot of great opportunities for us and for the world to decarbonize.
Okay, so help us understand, again, lots of opportunities here. We're seeing all kinds of the applications for hydrogen. What do you see as kind of standing in the way, or maybe a better way of putting it, what needs to happen to accelerate the growth of the hydrogen economy? And that can be, whether that's policy or the ESG movement type things within companies and what have you. But I'd just love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so probably the biggest problem with hydrogen today is just getting it economical. So if we can really figure out how to scale this up properly and drive the cost of hydrogen down, that's going to solve an awful lot of problems. We can do demonstration plants here and there, and people are going to say, "Oh, that really works well." But until we get the economics of this working out, then we won't get something sustainable. So you mentioned earlier about the hydrogen shot. I was a panelist on that last week, and I love what the policies are really working to do. $1 for 1 kilo in the next decade. That 111, and that's that moonshot as they talk about, or the hydrogen shot that we really need to do. And then how do we get there? It's about partnerships. It's about us, Siemens Energy, being the OEM, or the OEM, the original equipment manufacturer, knowing how to do it, knowing how to really work within the whole scheme. But it's also partnering with academia. The universities are important, and our customers are important. Trade groups such as the U.S. Chamber here as well are extremely important. And then the other one is the government. We can't do this on our own. I don't want to create a false economy, but I think what we need to do is get government funded incentives for R&D, and then also some of the incentives that we saw on wind and solar to help them really take off. That's what we need the government really to drive and work with us to help scale up that economy, that hydrogen economy. And we know that there's some different policies being voted on today or within the next couple of days. And, we've got a good future in that. And we really need both parties to come alongside and really go all in on hydrogen, scale up this hydrogen economy. It's the definition of Moore's Law. Every 4 to 5 years, it's going to scale, double, triple, 10 times. And that's what we need to do is figure out how to drive that. We're going to start probably in the mobility side. It's going to go to industry, and then eventually over to the large scale power generation. And when we're all tied in together, focused on driving that hydrogen economy as real true partners, then I think we're going to see the decarbonization of our planet go. So we're excited as Siemens Energy to be part of this and to be that partner, and really appreciate the other partners in the mix to really make this happen.
Excellent. Well, Rich, first of all, I'm glad that you raised the issue of the vote we hope to have today on the bipartisan infrastructure bill. I mean, we certainly very much believe that the funding that's in there to help things like the hydrogen economy are just critical for us. But let me just say how proud we are to be partnering with you on that and many other things, and just to thank you again for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks, Marty and Rich, for a really great discussion. I'm Dan Byers with the Chamber's Global Energy Institute. And for our next panel, we're going to hear from representatives of two companies that are extremely active in the hydrogen space, Honeywell and Hyundai. If you'll pardon the bad joke, I've called this our H squared panel on H2. Specifically joining us are Mark Schott, Senior Director in Honeywell subsidiary UOP's carbon capture and clean H2 business, as well as Yuval Steinman, Director of Eco-Compliance and Research at Hyundai Motor Company. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you. Thank you for having
Great.
us.
Well, let's get started. And Mark, we'll start with you. And maybe if you could just provide an overview of why Honeywell sees hydrogen as such an attractive opportunity, and maybe talk a little bit and help the audience understand the intersection of CCUS and hydrogen in particular and the potential synergies there.
Sure, Dan. Honeywell's a leading provider of carbon capture technology. We've been doing this for decades. This is a process by which we capture CO2 from process streams and from flue gas streams, purify it, and then prepare it for sequestration. Honeywell's also a leading provider of hydrogen technology, including efficient carbon capture for clean hydrogen production, hydrogen purification, and a complete portfolio of solutions for hydrogen combustion, encompassing hydrogen-capable burners, fuel supply products, and controls. As a company known for its innovation, one of the largest process licensing organizations in the world, we continue to develop solvents, adsorbents, membranes, cryogenic systems to increase the efficiency and drive down the cost of carbon capture. And right now, we're really focusing those R&D dollars and efforts on lowering the CO2 intensity in hydrogen production. And we're working on hydrogen transportation technologies for the developing hydrogen economy. Hydrogen with CCS can enable decarbonization of hard to decarbonize sectors, as we've heard earlier on the webinar. CCS can tackle emissions from existing assets, such as in refining, power sector, steel, cement. Low carbon hydrogen can be used as a versatile clean energy vector across many of those same sectors as well. CCS is ideal for very large point source emissions, while hydrogen can be used more economically in distributed point sources of emissions. Low carbon hydrogen can be produced both with CCS and also using electrolysis with renewable power. Low carbon hydrogen and CCS are quite synergistic today because CCS-based hydrogen is available at a much lower cost and larger scale than renewable power-based hydrogen today. CCS-based low-carbon hydrogen is the only ready now hydrogen route to make large impacts on decarbonization in the next several years. We can build the renewable-based hydrogen network at the same time we're already making large improvements in decarbonization today.
Great, thanks for that overview and explanation. And maybe similar question to Yuval. I think hydrogen has really burst on the scene over the last year or so here in the United States. But something that maybe people don't appreciate is Hyundai has been leading in this space for a very long time. So could you just give us an overview of Hyundai's history and experience and how hydrogen is important to your climate and emissions goals?
Yeah, absolutely. Here at Hyundai, as some of the panelists have said, we think there are multiple complementary solutions to get what we want. We want a carbon neutral kind of zero emissions future, and understand really battery electric vehicles have gotten a lot of the attention. We have EVs on the road. We have a new EV, the Ioniq 5, coming out soon that's on a dedicated platform that's going to spawn several more EVs. So we're all in on that part of the game, but we, again, believe there are complementary solutions. And hydrogen fuel cells, for a long time, we think have been really strategic in achieving this kind of carbon neutrality and zero emissions path or vision. So we've been working on fuel cells for over 20 years. And really what kind of epitomizes this is right now on the road here in California, where I am, we have the Nexo midsize fuel cell EV. It's the world's first midsize fuel cell SUV, pardon me. And it kind of shows you can have this great technology in a zero emissions package that people want. As you know, SUVs are really where the market is. And this vehicle, the Nexo, provides everything people want. We have 380 miles of range. It's easy to fuel up. It meets your everyday needs. And when you're driving it, you really don't know that you're driving anything other than a great SUV. So that's kind of the immediate real world application of our vision. But long-term, hydrogen with its breadth and abundance, we think it can apply to lots of different parts of the transportation industry. Obviously, light duty, heavy duty, and then ships, air, a lot of potential, we believe.
Great, thanks. Go back to Mark, and I'll just mention those of you in the audience, if you want to submit a question into the chat, we'll do our best to try to work it in. But Mark, you touched on this a little bit in your opening answer, but every time we see hydrogen events and discussion here, we inevitably get into the colors of the rainbow: green, blue, pink, gray, turquoise. I guess they're not rainbow colors, all of them. And we see some jurisdictions, particularly Europe, where there's a movement early on to shun blue hydrogen in particular. We here at the Chamber have been very adamant that, especially at this early stage, that we need to have everything on the table and be supporting and pursuing a blue hydrogen R&D and applications. Could you talk about Honeywell's view on that, and maybe how you see blue hydrogen in particular sort of fitting in with our existing natural gas infrastructure?
Yeah, Dan. So we've heard people advocate for almost color blindness. We don't really want to advocate for that. We would advocate for a robust discussion around carbon intensity. You can have blue hydrogen with very low carbon intensity, and you can have green hydrogen from electrolysis with a very high carbon intensity. Let me just give you an example. Blue hydrogen can be produced well below 2 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per kilogram of hydrogen. As long as we're managing the methane leaks in the natural gas grid coming in, and we're using cost-efficient CCS to capture the carbon that's produced in the hydrogen production. On the other side, if you just use grid-based power and electrolysis, you could be over 10 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per kilogram of hydrogen, so a factor of 4 to 5 times higher. And that isn't what we want. What we want is to drive the economy towards low carbon intensity. And we need to focus on each sector being driven by the things that each sector's needs. So for CCS-based hydrogen, what we need is to build up and build out the network for CO2 transportation and sequestration. We can capture the carbon at very low cost today, but we need a place to put it. We need a location where it can be stored securely. For renewable-based hydrogen, we need to focus on, as many people have mentioned already, scale up. We need far more renewable power and far more electrolysis at a much lower cost, right? So in the short term, we advocate for, let's start with CCS-based hydrogen. It doesn't need to rely on the availability of clean electricity today. That's a work in progress. It's less expensive than the renewable-based hydrogen today. It's commercially proven at scale and can have an immediate impact on lowering greenhouse gas emissions.
Thank you. That's really helpful, and I think really important points that we want to be performance-based, and think about the unique circumstances of the application as we think about this. Yuval, back to you. And Congressman Pence touched on this a little bit in his remarks. Heavy-duty trucking, his Cummins in his district. Can you just compare and contrast maybe how hydrogen fits in to medium heavy-duty trucking, buses, other applications where it's uniquely suited, and talk about what Hyundai's doing in that area?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, I mentioned hydrogen is unique in terms of its kind of breadth and scalability. And as we know, when you get into larger applications, heavier vehicles, so maybe for personal use, bigger sport utility vehicles, and then we get into commercial use, heavy duty trucks, it really becomes an ideal solution. So for Hyundai, we're demonstrating this. We have this on the road in Europe right now. In Switzerland, we have about 50 of our Exient heavy-duty fuel cell Class 8 trucks. These are big rigs that are in operation right now with several companies doing real work. And the feedback so far has been tremendous, and this program is going to be expanded. And we're going to bring some demonstration programs of these trucks right here to the United States relatively soon. The other thing that was mentioned was the challenge of infrastructure. And we know with hydrogen, the fueling experience for consumers and obviously in the commercial space is very similar to what people experience now with gasoline. So as we think about infrastructure and rolling out infrastructure for this kind of zero emissions path, there's hundreds of thousands of gas stations in the US right now. And what's unique with hydrogen, I mentioned our Nexo fuel cell SUV earlier, you can just roll into a fuel cell station. The act of fueling up is very similar to what people experience today and just drive away after a few minutes. So we think that's also an advantage of this technology.
Great, thanks. And now let's turn and talk a little bit more about policy, and we'll stick with you, Yuval. I know that Hyundai's partnering with the Department of Energy. Just give us an overview of those activities, and then maybe just share Hyundai's views on how the federal government can help to facilitate and accelerate adoption of hydrogen vehicles, whether they're light duty, heavy duty, et cetera.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have a partnership with the Department of Energy, and we're very grateful for that opportunity. We actually built a small hydrogen station in the DC area. I mentioned infrastructure is obviously a huge challenge for this technology. So we're demonstrating that, and we've provided to the DOE, I believe, 5 Nexos to really maximize the opportunity for people to experience what this technology is. And again, once you drive these vehicles, you realize it's very familiar feeling. I believe Congressman Pence, who opened up the discussion, has had an opportunity to visit this station, this site. So in terms of policy and support from the government, as I mentioned earlier, and other panelists have mentioned, again, to get to where we want to go, and I think we have a common goal of reducing emissions, reducing our carbon footprint, there are these complementary solutions. So all we ask is when there are investments made that something like hydrogen fuel cells are given equal footing, and the realization, again, we have a common purpose, so we have a lot of paths to get there. So we give these technologies equal consideration, and I think the outcome will be the best for everyone.
Great, thanks. Mark, we'll talk about policy. I see we have a lot of questions here coming in. Maybe I'll try to blend one in, but I wanted to ask you, and we've heard about this from Rich and others, in terms of, for many applications, we know how to do it, and it's just really a question of scaling and cost. Could you comment on the hurdles to broader commercialization and what the path to success might look like? Is it simply sort of getting early adopters to help stoke demand? And if I could sort of piggyback that, an interesting question that came in here, so beyond CCS and simply putting carbon underground, what about utilization, utilizing the carbon for useful products, and whether or not the Department of Energy is looking into that with respect to blue hydrogen?
Yeah, Dan. So from our perspective, as I've said previously, for existing clean hydrogen, key challenge is scale up of CO2 transportation and sequestration. To make this happen might be unpopular, but we really need a cost on carbon. If carbon doesn't have a cost, people aren't going to decarbonize. We need policies and regulation that make permitting of Class 6 wells faster, simpler. We advocate for that permitting responsibility to go to the state level. Pore space acquisition to be able to store the CO2 underground is a key issue that needs to be legally clear and applicable across the U.S. And then the long-term liability issue also needs to be resolved. And there are a number of states working on taking over that issue and for their own locale, making sure that that's clear and there's a strong basis, legal basis for it. Excuse me. For renewable-based hydrogen, as I said before, scale up and cost reduction is really the key issues. Today, for instance, there's less than 500 megawatts of renewable-based hydrogen globally. To put that in context, that's about half the size of one typical steam methane reformer making hydrogen more conventionally. So the scale that's needed for the renewable side is enormous. And we need to bring those costs down. We need policies to incentivize both production side scale up and consumption side demand. I've seen one of the questions about what can small companies do. Frankly, small companies really need help on the consumption side to make this a practical solution for them. We need continued development, such as what Honeywell's doing in carbon capture, proton exchange membranes, and AEM membranes, solid oxide electrolyzers. And then work that we're also doing in hydrogen transportation technologies, creating better chemical routes for transporting hydrogen around the world at lower cost. The CO2 question, as an engineer, it's a difficult problem thermodynamically speaking. We've worked on converting CO2 into e-methanol, as it's called. Very expensive, very costly from an energy perspective. I believe we'll find nature-based routes that eventually will drive the cost of CO2 conversion down significantly. And it is an area that we would encourage continued government support in the R&D space to really drive that.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for that explanation. And you mentioned the point about a consumption. And I know this is an area where I think we're going to see potentially more announcements and activity leading up to the COP in Glasgow at the beginning of November. And there's the Biden administration and others around the world are really looking at ways to fuel those early adopters from sectors that are going to need to purchase hydrogen-based products and solutions. We see one more question here from the chat, and then I'll finish up with kind of a lightning round. But Yuval, we have a question. Is there a safety concern associated with hydrogen filling stations for long-haul transportation? Would you care to comment on that?
Absolutely. I think, whether it's in the vehicle development or the infrastructure development, I think the industry has realized safety is an utmost concern in everything we do. So in our experience, done the right way, there are no safety concerns. I know in our vehicles, enormous efforts are made into the tanks and the fuel cell systems themselves. So we do not see that as a concern.
Great. Well, why don't we wrap up? We just have a minute or so left, and we'll just do kind of quick lightning round. And I like this question, which is basically based on you guys are both on the ground and really working on this issue up front. From Washington perspective, what do you think maybe is not well appreciated or understood? And what's the one thing you'd like to see those of us in DC in the policy world make sure we don't overlook? Go ahead, Mark. We'll start with you and finish with Yuval.
Yeah, so from our perspective, 45Q and enhancing it is something that we would really like to see. We'd like to see $85 a ton for CO2 with direct pay and without the requirement of having a facility-wide emission reduction. We believe that will actually encourage broader CCS activity. Specifically for hydrogen, we'd like to see production investment tax credits, $3 for renewable-based hydrogen and $2 per kilogram for CCS-based hydrogen.
Great. Yuval?
Yeah. So you mentioned us being on the ground. I think one thing we realize, again, in this zero emissions path, I mentioned battery electric vehicles have understandably got a lot of the attention. So I know people in Washington working on this are very aware, but the broad general awareness of the benefits of this technology of hydrogen fuel cells and what it can do, anything we can do to increase awareness, which I think will feed demand. But also I mentioned earlier the challenge of infrastructure. It's the classic chicken or the egg conundrum. We provide vehicles, we need places for them to fuel, and the fueling stations want vehicles to use them. So obviously a focus on infrastructure as we move forward is critical.
Fantastic. Well, that's all the time we have. Thank you both for great discussion. And we're going to turn it over to my colleague Heath Nachmos for our final session. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. I am pleased to welcome to this morning's conversation Phil Musser, Vice President of Government Affairs at Nextera Energy. Though many of you are likely quite familiar with Nextera's global leadership in renewable energy development, they are also investing in many other technologies that are emerging players in reaching national and international carbon reduction goals, including hydrogen. Phil and his team represent Nextera Energy and its subsidiaries, including Florida Power Light Company, Gulf Power Company, and Nextera Energy Resources, before Congress and the executive branch. In a prior professional life, Phil served as Senior Vice President and Chief Communications Officer for the Boeing Company. Phil also served as a senior advisor to several presidential campaigns, governors, senators, and members of Congress, and he even served as Deputy Chief of Staff at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development and the U.S. Department of State. Thus, Phil brings an exceptional diversity of experiences to today's discussion. Welcome to the discussion, Phil.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate you guys taking the time to talk about this important topic at the Chamber. It means a lot.
Great. It's good to have you as well. Nextera is America's largest generator of wind and solar power. And in some ways, you're just getting started, with tens of billions in new renewable investments planned in the short term alone. Where does hydrogen fit into the picture for Nextera? And why is the company so interested in it? And how might it help meet 2050 net zero goals?
Yeah, it's a great question. So there are obviously a variety of reasons that Nextera is interested in the green hydrogen space in particular. But where I'd kind of focus and what we've talked about publicly really is the importance of the future of green hydrogen for our utility, Florida Power and Light. As we think about our portfolio in Florida, we see the development of green hydrogen solutions for our combined cycle gas burning plants as a real opportunity to bridge kind of the final gap, the decarbonization goal that we've got, and frankly, that the entire electrical sector shares. We see green hydrogen as the key to unlocking that. And so we had a great presentation earlier from our partners at Siemens about how this works. But in a nutshell, what we've got going publicly is exactly what Rich was talking about. We're in the process of rolling out a pilot project in Central Florida at our Okeechobee Power facility that very simply will use some of our solar capacity to power an electrolyzer that will produce green hydrogen for use at our combined cycle gas plants. And the interesting part about hydrogen, and a key point of the discussion from Siemens, is that the neat part about hydrogen is, you don't have to start from scratch with your invested capital relative to your combined cycle facilities. You can modify and increase the blend that you feed the green hydrogen into the natural gas mix over time. And over the next 5, 10, 15-year period, we see this as a really key way that we're going to bring, ultimately 100% carbon-free power to the state of Florida. And in the state of Florida, we serve 15 million customers and represent by far and away the largest service territory in the state. And so we're excited about it because it partners well with our investments that we're making in solar. As you look outside of Florida at our unregulated business, obviously is the largest generator of power from wind and the sun, with big investments in battery storage as well. We see a ton of synergy with respect to the ability to produce green hydrogen for a broad scale of commercial uses, many of which have been talked about already on the call today.
No, that's great, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because I did want to dig a little bit deeper into the pilot project at Florida Power and Light, and particularly, why it is exceptionally attractive in a state like Florida, which has a unique grid. You're essentially peninsular in nature, and of course, renewable resource limitations with not appreciable amounts of onshore wind, and how that fits into long-term emission reductions in Florida and otherwise. And also, if assuming this pilot is successful, how do you think its success will impact Nextera's vision for investment in various decarbonization pathways, both within Florida and otherwise?
Well, look, it's in its early stages, and so we're doing it with or without government subsidy and policy support, which I know we'll talk about in a second. But it's an important, it's an important piece of the puzzle. Our power in Florida, look, let's be honest, we're not doing wind in Florida. That really isn't an option, even though candidly some of the best wind resource off the shores of Florida might be there. Part of the dynamics of tourism in the state, I don't think doesn't make wind resource a realistic answer. But man, we're going to be investing. We've got a program to install over 30 million solar panels by 2030 in the state of Florida, as part of our strategic goal of Florida Power and Light. That's going to create a tremendous solar resource. We'll have to see what happens with the outcome of some of the policy discussions in Washington, but if there are meaningful changes in tax policy, that number could even escalate. And so we look at that as a real opportunity from an energy source perspective to, again, use our solar assets to create a product that we can, for our own use, essentially create a low or zero cost fuel that also has a great decarbonization benefit. So we're excited about it. And, obviously, I think we're a bit of a proxy for the utility sector in that regard. I know there's a lot of excitement across the industry about the applications for different uses of hydrogen. And I would say our focus, from the perspective of policy and also from the perspective of our business, is really around the cleanest forms of hydrogen that can be created and generated. And so we're excited about working outside of the state of Florida. Obviously, we've talked about fuel sources for transportation, blending with natural gas. There's obviously a pipeline consideration and transportation opportunity here. Obviously, ammonia and some of the commercial, farm-related applications. So, when you're the biggest generator of renewables in the country, that's an exciting opportunity. As the previous presenter from Honeywell was talking about, kind of what's here and now, and what's needed to go to the next step is scale. And I think one of the things that our company brings to the table in that regard is we do have the scale to kind of help the industry mature. And so we've done a variety of different, market analyses on this. But the other part that we really like in telling the story about green hydrogen is this is the potential to unlock a massive sector in the United States relative to economic growth and investment. Our company already invests between 15 and $20 billion a year in capital investments. And if you look at what the right policy frameworks could do for investment in manufacturing of just the electrolyzers that we're talking about, we see a potentially, $60 billion market by 2050 that, could spur $2 trillion of capital investment and create somewhere between 1 million and 1.5 million new jobs in our country. And so at a time when we're talking about, a transition in the energy economy, we think that hydrogen could provide a huge pathway in that transition.
Thanks a lot for that, Phil. I'm glad you referenced Congress in Washington, because obviously energy and our future energy transition are big pieces of what is being discussed here in Washington on a daily basis. And of course, with today being a rather, make or break day, if you will, with respect to the bipartisan infrastructure framework package. It is rather timely. From your perspective, though, Phil, what are one or two of the most important things that Congress and the federal government can do to facilitate and accelerate the adoption of hydrogen in the power sector? For example, what would the passage of that bipartisan infrastructure framework mean? It includes $9.5 billion for hydrogen, including the establishment of 4 major regional hydrogen demonstration hubs. What would that mean in terms of de-risking hydrogen projects and sending a signal to capital-intensive industries such as the power sector that you're involved in?
Yeah. So should we take a wager on whether this thing passes or fails today yet? Is that, I think, it's anybody's guess as where this thing ends in the next 10 hours. So this is a timely conversation that the chamber is pulling together, which I appreciate very much having the chance to participate in. Let me give your audience a sense of where I think things stand on this front and the importance of it. So obviously we have the bipartisan infrastructure discussion going on today. If that bill passes, as Keith notes, there's a ton of opportunity in there, largely in the kind of how do we advance research and development. The hydrogen hub concept is really interesting. They're meaningfully scaled, and they're importantly resourced in a way that they never have before. So the administration, and candidly, what I love about this issue, and what is really important, I think, for everybody on the phone, or listening in right now to understand, is the discussion around hydrogen has occupied bipartisan space. And this is great, because this really should be seen as a bipartisan public policy issue. It's terrific that we had a conservative Republican congressman on to start the show, and that we've got bedfellows in the United States Senate, like Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, one of the more liberal members of the Senate from Rhode Island, partnering with Senator Todd Young, a conservative from Indiana, to offer solutions in the hydrogen space. So as chamber members watching this, as you talk to your elected officials, I think everyone would be doing ourselves a service in this space to be highlighting how policies that are funding or providing tax treatment to hydrogen solutions from a public policy perspective can occupy a unique nonpartisan ground. Often in our discussion around clean energy and climate, we find ourselves falling into partisan silos. What I'm working on at Nextera and what our company supports is a bipartisan approach towards hydrogen solutions. And so we have some real opportunity. The short-term bipartisan bill has got a ton of money in it, and if it passes today or in the future, it would meaningfully move that forward on the R&D front. The second piece of the puzzle is there's a very important provision in the reconciliation proposal, which would price the production of green hydrogen at $3 a kilogram. This would get directly at the question of bringing down the cost to bring price competitive 100% clean energy, clean green hydrogen to the market in a way that can compete more efficiently and effectively with already available sources of hydrogen. And that's another one that we're extremely excited about. Where it sits is it's currently in the House bill, it's currently in the Senate bill, and if there's a reconciliation package, we do think that there's a very good likelihood that a production tax credit for hydrogen will be included in that final provision. So, as members of the chamber, I think you guys really need to pay close attention to these measures, engage with your Congress men and women, and with your advocates, and highlight that this is, as the wind credit maybe was back in the 90s when it was set up, this is a credit that can unleash enormous economic opportunity and can be done so in a way that will create a ton of great American jobs. And it's the kind of issue that the chamber, Republicans and Democrats, can all get behind. So please keep an eye on it.
No, that is true. I mean, it's very much, stay tuned for what happens today and in the weeks and months to come, because if there's anything predictable about Washington, is it's not predictable. Phil, thank you so much for joining this morning and providing, so many valuable insights on the increasing role that hydrogen is poised to play in our energy future.
Thanks a lot, Heath. Appreciate it, man.
Well, let me again thank all of our speakers today, and thank you for joining us. I hope you remember to register for our next event on October 14th, where we will examine cybersecurity in the energy sector. And of course, let me again thank our sponsor, Siemens Energy. So please enjoy the rest of your day.